If I could have your attention, please. Hello. I'd like to call the meeting to order.
I'll use my best Muppet Blues voice to read it.
Oh, it's so nice to have the lights off up here.
They're not very behaving tonight. Okay. What? Keep on talking? Okay. The first order of business is having the clerk read the posting of the warrant, or the return anyway.
Pursuant to the within warrant, I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Sunderland by posting up attested copies of the same at the town office building, the Sunderland Public Library, and the Sunderland Post Office 7 days at least before the date hereof, as within directed. Frederick A. Laurinaitis, Constable of Sunderland, October 2nd, 2013, at 1 p.m.
Okay. Evidently, we have a valid meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody here on such a beautiful evening. I had the pleasure of driving up River Road to get here this evening, and looking across the fields with the full moon, it was really a pretty evening out there. The reason we're gathered tonight, as you're all well aware, is primarily to discuss the creation of a new ambulance service. The first article is going to deal with allowing the town to form an agreement. The second one deals with the funding of the agreement. And the third article we should all be quite happy about, I think, and that is it deals with paying off the school debt for when we had to rebuild the school. So, before we get started, a couple of announcements. One is that when you came in, there was a poster out there with some postcards, and the title of it is "What's on Your Priority List?" And what it is the town is conducting a survey to try and determine what the interests of the folks in town are for the town's future. So everyone would appreciate it if you would take a look at the survey and complete it. The second notice is that there's a free regional drive-through fluke clinic for ages 6 months and older that will be held Sunday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Yankee Candle Administrative Offices on Routes 5 and 10 in South Deerfield. Vaccine and nasal spray will be available, and get your flu shots. Okay, without further ado, Article 1.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into an intermunicipal agreement with the towns of Deerfield and Whiteley pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Sections 4A, to establish and operate a regional emergency medical service effective January 1, 2014, for a term of 1 year, renewable for successful 3-year terms, subject to appropriations in each fiscal year, and upon such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen deem appropriate, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to take all actions necessary to implement such agreement, recognizing, however, that the Board retains exclusive discretion as to whether to execute said agreement, and would do so only if the towns of Deerfield and Whiteley support the establishment of such regional service.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any explanation? Who wants to address that? For newcomers, Bob Ahern is the fire chief and head of the EMTs, I think, in Sunderland. So, Bob?
Yep. My name is Robert Ahern. I'm the fire chief and ambulance director for the town of Sunderland. And we've been looking into doing a shared ambulance service for close to 3 years now. And this is the accumulation of our efforts. As you may or may not know, Whately the other night approved joining the venture, and this is our chance to talk about it tonight. What we're going to do is in Sunderland, go from a basic level EMT service up to a paramedic level service. What we have now is a call system. We have one full-time firefighter EMT and the rest are call. This new service would be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, staffed by a paramedic and another EMT. There would be a ready reserve second ambulance, which is going to be housed in our station. So if the first call goes out and there's a second call, that people go to the station and stand by until that first ambulance is back in service. For the last 3 years, we've had a consultant as part of our discovery, and he went through each and every one of our budgets and looked into our run reports and came up with his information. We looked at his reports and, pared it down to having it more realistic for what our 3 towns needed. We've got in front of you the handouts. I think I told you about the present ambulance service. We're going to have a shared ambulance service. Cost for the taxpayers. The present ambulance service is approximately 44 cents on the tax rate. This new ambulance service on a $200,000 home will be about $42 on the tax bill. They got comparison to other public safety services down at the bottom of the sheet. Fire department budget, $82,000. Highway department budget, $248,000. Police department budget, $354,000. Another sheet here, they got frequently asked questions. I don't know if you want me to go through these or... When did the 3-town assessment and the planning process start? I went through that a little bit. We've been almost 3 years into this. We had Bruce Baxter and Company, the consultant that came in. He comes from a much larger ambulance service down in Connecticut, and he gave us his expertise and what he thought we needed. Like I said, we pared that down to what we really want. The next question, what are the deficiencies within the present ambulance service? Let me go into that a little bit. The current service we have is a call system, and the call system has worked fine for many years. Right now, it's getting so fewer and fewer people are signing up for, to become EMTs on the call system. I think everybody's lives are busier now than they ever been. People's jobs are more demanding. Their family life maybe is more demanding. They don't have time to do this, on their free time. I think it's, high time that we looked into something different. This is a great opportunity. It's probably a opportunity that we won't be coming down the pike in the near future to join in with 2 local towns. Next question is, what will the governance system be for the proposed regional service? Each town is going to have 2 representatives on the board, probably the current ambulance directors to start with, and somebody else that the selectman picks out. It could be a selectman. So there will be a 6-person committee that'll have a board of oversight. And how will the new system enhance patient care? We'll talk about, the current system in Sunderland is a basic level service. What we're going to be going to is a paramedic level service. Paramedic level service gives you, the chance to actually have the emergency room prior to getting to the emergency room in the back of the ambulance. They'll be able to give you fluids, drug therapy if necessary. They'll be able to hook you up to a heart monitor. A lot of the things we can't do now. Would there be enough jobs for the current EMTs? Yeah. The current EMTs, they would be able to sign up for the second ambulance. If they were qualified, they'd be able to, go on to the full-time service if that's what they want to. And the backup service is probably going to be comprised of a lot of our call EMTs. You want to go over the...
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, questions from the audience?
Questions, anyone? Please use the microphone for questions, please, because the acoustics in the room are so poor. Thank you.
Do we have any statistics on what percentage of Sunderland EMT calls are made for university students who are at Squire Village or at Cliffside? Is there any way we can ask for any kind of compensation from the university for cases like that? You have an answer? Can you?
I'm one of the call EMTs, and we do try to rely on students from the university to help us out. Sometimes we have rarely good responses from them, but lately we have not really had anybody that we can rely on, consistently. So it's not really working out well to have a ready reserve staff always there for us.
Thank you. Okay.
Right, you're kind
You
of
want to
wondering
rephrase your
essentially-
question?
I think everybody understood.
You want to know essentially what percent,
Basically wants to know, are we going to try to go to the university and get money from them?
right, right,
Oh,
right.
Short answer, no.
so. Any other questions?
Not so much a question, but can I see a show of hands of how many of you have used 911 in a medical emergency? Good. Okay. Well, I've had to use it three times in the last 6 weeks, and it's an eye-opening experience. Seriously. My husband had a heart attack. The police showed up right away. The ambulance came right along. We had to wait. We had to wait for another EMT. Then they had to wait for another ambulance from some other town that had a paramedic. Well, when your loved one is having a medical emergency and it's life-threatening, and you're sitting there wondering why the ambulance hasn't left your home yet, it's pretty doggone scary. Second time took even longer because the ambulance with the paramedic had to come from Greenfield. 30 minutes later, I'm still wondering why the ambulance, and I think there were two, sitting out there with my husband in it, going nowhere. The people were nice, The EMTs were great, the police were great. Thank God for volunteers and all these first responders, but we need this service. It's kind of like having insurance that you hope the hell you never have to use. And you don't want basic insurance when your loved one is having a heart attack or any other emergency like that. You want the best you can get. I'm paying my $42. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
Well, I don't need a microphone. My name is Ken. I lived in Sunderland since 1952. I myself had used the ambulance twice since 52. Now, I'm going to be a devil's advocate here. If we vote this in, we're going to have a paramedic. The first call, if it comes out of South Deerfield, the paramedic's going to be in that ambulance. We're still stuck back to EMTs in Sunderland.
That's not correct. That's
Oh, it's not.
correct, Ken.
Well, I didn't meet the first Frontier meeting, so.
In fact, what happens is after, when the first ambulance gets, when the ambulance gets called out, there's a second crew that's on call. They immediately are called, there'll be a paramedic and an EMT, and those two will then come to the Sunderland station where they will wait to be dispatched for the next call, if a next call comes in. So we will have there will be two full paramedic level ambulances.
Well, I apologize because I never got that piece of information.
That's why we're here, Ed. I mean, Ken. Geez, I forgot your name already. But that's why we're here, is to answer those questions, because those are very good questions. And in fact, we've been asking those questions for 2 years. And when we first started out, that's not how we envisioned it. But that's what it morphed into, because we heard people just like yourself asking that question, and that's why we decided to have the two paramedic level ambulances.
And I brought this up from a paramedic from Amherst that brought that up. That same question to ask. And the other thing I thought of was, what was the cost differential for us to hire another full-time EMT as compared to joining this regional ambulance service? Has anybody checked into that, of hiring a second EMT and the cost differential for the townspeople?
Actually, Ken, if I could, that a couple of years ago when the study was actually done, and the question about providing a paramedic level service for, and we talk about each other as towns, but talk about it as a population in a geographic area. So we're talking about all three towns. The group consensus was to create a paramedic level service to cover the three towns, and the EMT, now it's important to bear, and the difference between an EMT level service and a paramedic level service. So the salary and indirects to the town of Sunderland would probably be close to what the assessment actually here is, based on what we currently pay and what the proposed budget is for the operating of this paramedic level service. But we never drilled down in that analysis once the group decided that paramedic level 24/7 with an on-call, a ready reserve EMT paramedic level was the best interest of all three communities. So the numbers, the drilling down on individual numbers, we never really looked back on that. I can say with a straight face, an EMT in the budget line in the town operating budget, EMT services plus their salary probably are equal to, or even maybe a little greater than, the bump up of what this assessment in the formula is. So again, it's a difference in the service versus a staffing. And we thought that the group's consensus was a paramedic level service to get rid of the intercepts, to provide an immediate level of care at a higher level was worth the potential difference of either equipment or staffing. So I think that sums it up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My question actually has to do with, assuming Whately's already approved it, whatever happens here and then happens in Deerfield, let's say it all goes through. Are we then, is this regional board just the 3 towns, and will it always be the 3 towns, or will this then potentially open up to other towns in the area that see either the successes or the opportunity to benefit from the planning and the structure that we created?
When we first started, Judy, Margaret, I think, sent notices out to about 6 towns. And when we first started, we had conversations with, Hatfield was at the meeting, and at the first meeting also, we had representatives from Conway. And Conway and Hatfield both dropped out. Conway felt that we would not be able to service them to the level that they needed, and that Hatfield at the time felt that right now they're getting backup support from Northampton, which is on their back doorstep, so they felt for the time being that they wouldn't have to join with us either. I think if you asked all of us, and what we're hearing from others is right now it's going to be the 3 towns together, and I think most of us would be happy if we had other towns come in, because then we'd maybe able to redeploy and get better response times. If we added additional towns, we'd probably be able to redeploy our assets and probably have a better coverage of maybe some of the outlying areas. So we'll be open to suggestions. If somebody wants to join, in our contract, in our intermunicipal agreement, we have provisions in there for people to have buy-in, so there is possible. And there's also provisions if someone decides, that one town decides it's not working for them, we have provisions in the IMF or IMA for people to get out of the agreement as well. The first year, year and a half, 2 years, it's going to be a lot of, trying to feel our way through the dark to try to get the best for all of our towns, but sure.
And thank you for turning the mic. My follow-up is, okay, so you said that there's things in the contract for like an opt-out clause, like after a certain amount of time period, somebody can say, this isn't working for us, we want to get out of this. Does that only go through the governing board, the 6 people, the 2 from each town? Or is that something that then also comes back to town meeting and say, yeah, we're going to let you out? And the same thing for if somebody wants to come in.
Scott's reading right now.
We're checking the IMA.
Okay, wow, I stumped the selectman, nice.
No, I think there's
Give me a little wifely victory.
There's a phrase in there that says any significant change has to go to the town meetings.
That's correct.
There's a phrase in there that we're looking for that says any significant change to the IMA has to go back to the individual towns for approval.
And significant is defined as what? Plus or more than 30%?
It could, a significant change could be considered a change in location, the housing of the ambulance, either one of them. It could be considered the addition or termination of any town.
Okay, so it's not really based on, like, Whately is 16% according to the numbers that are on there, on the board. So Whately doesn't have a majority, but they have an equal vote on the board, which is fine. But they couldn't just say, because we're only 16%, we're going to slide out because that's not a majority. It still has a whole process to go through. And that only goes through the board, or it also comes through the towns?
It'd go through both.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Mr. Moderator?
Margaret?
Just to be clear, the assessment for this regional ambulance service will always go before town meeting annually.
Thank you.
I'm Ray Ellsworth from South Main Street. 30 years ago, when I was on the Finance Committee, the ambulance fund was kind of revolving, and we got insurance money for that. Is that no longer, do we no longer bill insurance companies for ambulance runs?
That's correct, Ray. The town has an ambulance reserve fund. Every year we use some from the ambulance reserve fund to offset the cost of the town's ambulance service. Once this service becomes regional, the revenues will then go to the regional service. They'll begin collecting the fees, and those fees will offset the town's apportion costs for that ambulance service. So it'll work the same way, just on a regional scale.
If I could, Mr. Moderator. Ray, if I could follow up, we currently fund through taxation about $62,000+ in on the levy, and the insurance payback is about just north of $80,000. So we underwrite, a slight majority when you incorporate all the indirect costs, but we do recoup insurance monies for each and every run, and there's a billing agent that we actually use to collect those funds.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. We'll vote on Article 1. Article 1 is to establish the service and allow the selectmen to come up with an agreement between the three towns. So, all those in favor of Article 1, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. I'll declare it unanimous. Article 2.
Mr. Moderator, if I could warn town meeting first, this is the verbose money article. Here we go. Move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $45,625 and transfer from ambulance reserve the sum of $62,658 for the sum of $155,367 as part of its allocable share of the fiscal 2014 net operating cost of $438,241 and capital cost of $55,350 for the regional emergency medical service described in Article 1, and further to transfer from line item 5120 the sum of $12,435, transfer from line item 5110 the sum of $25,002, transfer from line item 2315400 the sum of $8,500, transfer from line item 2325110 the sum of $1,147, all for the purposes for which such sums are currently appropriated, and also for the purpose of meeting the town's allocable share of the fiscal 2014 net operating and capital cost as described above. Provided, however, that in the event the Board of Selectmen elects not to enter into an intermunicipal agreement for such regional service in the calendar year 2013, I brought her to tears.
She's asleep.
Article 1.
How she feels, Scott.
I know, I'm almost done. Two more lines. $45,625 raised by taxation and the $62,658 transferred from ambulance reserve shall not be expended for such purposes, but may be transferred for any lawful purpose or otherwise closed out in accordance by the law, and other sums transferred above shall be expended for the purposes originally appropriated. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please?
No.
No. Second.
Second.
There was.
Second. Okay, explanation.
If I could, Mr. Moderator, this is the mosaic of funding sources required in the available budget, in the available levy limit, and it's important to bear in mind, to fund the transition and the first year of this service. It's important to bear in mind that if this IMA works out and an agency is actually formed and a service begins, there's still a transition period. So this begins the process of funding the regional EMS if everything, all the ducks are in a row and it moves forward, we still have that transition where we have an ambulance service and the regional EMS is getting off its feet. We have to, in many ways, split both. We have the capacity both in levy and in these accounts to do that. That's what this article is about. This gets us to annual town meeting, where we will be appropriating for next year's budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Good evening. I would just like to follow up on the town administrator's comment or explanation of the ambulance insurance receipts, because I heard two things. One was that the receipts would go to offset the budget. But the second thing I heard was that it would operate the same way as it does now, which to me means there would be a reserve. So I'd like to check if there's going to be a reserve.
Well, what has to happen, Stuart, it's as you're aware, it's very complicated because right now, the town of Sunderland, the town of Deerfield, and the town of Whiteley will have licensed ambulance systems. The three-town system will not be a licensed ambulance system when it first starts. So the calls that are going to be made, and I think what Scott was alluding to, was when the first calls are being made for that first 3 months or 4 months, they're going to have to be billed through the participating communities until the other town is, or the other 3 towns are together and they have been licensed by the state of Massachusetts. So that's, I think that's what maybe the little change.
Is there going to be a regional reserve?
Yes.
Then why do we need to appropriate capital?
Actually, Stuart, that's a really good question. The budgeting for the regional EMS includes a portion of capital for replacement of equipment. We know in the town of Sunderland the challenges of not funding capital on a programmatic basis and then coming forward and asking for capital allocations, appropriations for either replacement equipment or civil structural work. This system is developed and has essentially got capital assessment built into the operating budget. Sorry, built into the assessment, not the operating budget, so that we can actually have, at time of capital replacement, monies available. That's why there's a separate capital line as part of the assessment formula. And it's important to bear in mind, this assessment formula was developed with the consensus of the working group, and then it was important from the consultant and from the EMS director's perspective. We started years ago in the town of Sunderland to have an ambulance reserved funding for ambulance equipment replacement. And over the last decade, Bob, that ambulance reserve appropriation has dwindled as we have moved more and more of those ambulance reserve dollars toward the operating budget. So this is starting out with a capital assessment, relatively modest capital assessment, and we're hoping that it stays that way.
Thank you, Scott. Anyone else?
This may just be nitpicking, but I'm wondering if I could have a very brief explanation of what each of the line items is, 231, 5110, et cetera. I'm just seeing the numbers.
All right. We got a spreadsheet that has them all spelled out.
It's all, are these just town accounts that we have that are interesting?
Exactly. They're all specific accounts related to the existing ambulance service, with the exception of, it's really important, the very first line is raise and appropriate.
Okay.
That's the part that lands on the tax rate.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Mr. Moderator, can I just, I'd like to make one comment. Please understand that everything that we're doing tonight was predicated on the 3 towns voting this. And Whiteley has voted in the affirmative. We're voting tonight, and Deerfield is voting on October 28th. If one of the towns does not support it, then what we'll need to do at that point is we'll have to get back together and and we'll talk with it, we'll get our groups back together and see how to go forward. But I'm sure Chief will be bringing back a new plan at that time. So it's still, for us, there's still a lot of concern on what's going to happen and what's going to go forward next year as well.
All right, we'll vote on Article 2, which is to fund the new ambulance service from a variety of sources. All those in favor of Article 2, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. I'll declare it unanimous. Article 3. Before we start Article 3, the amount of work that went into the development of the last two articles has been tremendous, and as Bob said, they've been working on this for 3 years, meeting at least monthly, and I'm sure they've met a lot more frequently than that. So the amount of effort that's gone into it, and the fact, from my perspective anyway, that it was initiated by the leaders in the EMT fields of each one of the towns, I think was significant. So I think that we owe all of the people that participated in this discussion and getting this to where we are really a debt of gratitude for their efforts, and we thank you. Article 3.
Article 3, move that the town vote to transfer from stabilization the sum of $70,000 to supplement the funding from the School Building Assistance Grant Special Reserve Fund approved under Article 5 of the April 26, 2013 annual town meeting to pay off the bond or bonds issued by the town treasurer for the Sunderland Elementary School reconstruction project pursuant to the vote under Article 2 of the April 25, 2003 special town meeting, which project was reimbursed in part by the Massachusetts School Building Authority, provided, however, that the School Building Assistance Grant Special Reserve Fund shall be fully expended before supplemental funds provided under this article are expended to pay off said bonds or funds. That was one sentence.
Is there a second? Okay, motion's made and seconded. Brief explanation, please.
If I could, Mr. Moderator, 10 years ago, of course, 11 years ago, the school was reconstructed after a roof collapse. At the time, the town opted to take a lump sum distribution from the School Building Authority, and that lump sum distribution was set aside. The town, of course, appropriated through a debt exclusion vote monies to pay off the construction loan. We are at the point of January 1st, January 1st, 2014, able to call the 10-year note. And in calling the 10-year note, we will no longer, of course, have the note, and the appropriated monies, as well as its impact on the tax rate, will drop off. Over the 10-year period, the trajectory of our investment, much like the national economy, went clunk, 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 and kind of petered out. So it looks like, and it's still going clunk, and sorry for the sound effect, but everybody knows when the wheel's off the carriage. So that said, we're asking tonight to take $70,000 from stabilization, appropriate $70,000 from stabilization. At January 1st, the time of the bonds being called, with the actual value less than $70,000 will be moved from stabilization, coupled with the school building assistance money that's left over. It's about $2.1 million, and the bonds will be called. In the annual town meeting in the spring, we expect, as we have in years past, when we've appropriated from stabilization, to replenish stabilization from available funds. So we're hoping to close this out in January, and the punchline is, if we call the bonds, we save the annual interest, It's about $130-something thousand. We want to do this because it saves the town money. I think it's
Thank you.
136, just to be exact.
So if we transfer 70, we're going to save the difference between 70 and 136.
We're gonna certainly save the value of the annual appropriation.
Also, we're asking for 70, but most likely we'll be spending about 53,000.
Right.
But they don't have the final numbers at the present time. And although Scott's sound effects were very good, he forgot to tell us that in the beginning, we had a tremendous return on investment.
Correct.
So basically this $50,000 we're paying now, we more than made that up in the original. And the last few years, the other thing he didn't tell you is that the interest rate, when we've been signing our little interest rates on the notes, Mr. Bergeron loves signing that, especially when they're down like about 1.2%.
Right.
So we've been saving a lot of money on those notes the last few years. So this 50,000, it's money well spent for the town.
Thank you. Any questions? Everybody's in favor of saving money. That's good. All right. All those in favor of Article 3, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Declare it unanimous. Okay, we need one more motion.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to make a motion to dissolve the meeting.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to dissolve the meeting. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you all for coming. Very good discussion.